that is used by the members of parliament there?
Well, the security, it's there's a balance. We're a free and democratic society, so citizens come onto the lawn of Parliament. They're allowed to do yoga there or protest there. That's part of our open and free democracy. But when you get to the doors of Parliament, obviously there's guards. There's passes. Security screening system. If you're a visitor to Parliament Hill, you go security system like you do at any airport. Backpacks searched and electronic surveillance as well. Cameras everywhere and so on. So there's a balance between protection and allowing Parliament to be open and available for all Canadians and visitors to visit their Parliament buildings.
You can see these live pictures as the situation is ongoing. You can see on the left side of your screen just dozens of police officers walking around the building, the secured buildings on Parliament Hill. I have Senator Percy down on the line, who is also on lockdown. Senator, I saw earlier in these live pictures, it looked like police were escorting some people out. They were wearing suits and were holding a briefcase, so I assumed that they were either staff members or possibly members of Parliament who are being escorted out. Is that what has been happening, and do you expect to be escorted out anytime soon?
No, we've been told to stay in our office, and that's what we're doing.
Okay, Senator Percy Down, appreciate your time. Stay safe, and thank you so much for giving us that perspective on what has been happening. We want to go to Peter Brooks now on the ground, and Peter, tell me where you are. Okay, you are in Washington. So what's the perspective from there?
Obviously, we're very concerned, and the first priority obviously is to mitigate the risk to the people on Parliament Hill and in Ottawa there. But then, of course, we have to figure out what happened, whether this is related to what happened in Canada on Monday, whether this is related to events in the Middle East, whether there may be additional terror attacks in North America. So obviously, without jumping to conclusions, we're obviously down here in Washington, we're obviously very concerned about our neighbors to the north.
I want to bring this up again because it was quite astounding to hear from one of the journalists there on the ground. And he said from the witnesses that he spoke with, at least one of the gunmen entered through that main entrance in the main Parliament building, was able to stand there in the foyer and to start shooting indiscriminately. He says that he saw somebody get shot and then his body just slump over. He presumes that this person might be dead. But the terror threat level in Canada was recently raised from low to medium, and I'm curious to know what exactly that means. And are you concerned that this gunman was able to just, it sounds like, just walk right in?
Well, it's difficult for me to comment on Canadian security, but I am here on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., and we have had incidents at our own Capitol. And we are lucky to have these brave individuals who are willing to put themselves in harm's way to protect us, whether it's the public or our members of Congress or Parliament. But sometimes, people are able to breach that security because they are also the people's houses. And we do have visitors that come, and obviously we've made some changes down here with a Capitol Visitor Center where people have to go through and be screened. But obviously there's issues out there about what's going on in the world, and Canadian intelligence obviously had some sort of issues that made them raise their threat level to the level that they decided to do that, perhaps based on intelligence, perhaps based on individuals within Canada that talked about this. And of course, I would think is probably related to what happened on Monday with the killing of that Canadian soldier. So we're in difficult times here and obviously uncharted waters. And so we're going to obviously have to put all of this together. International cooperation between the United States and Canada and our friends overseas is going to be critical to dealing with the potential that this was another terror attack.
Right. Yeah. You can't ignore those striking similarities that you mentioned, Peter, with the incident just a few days ago in Quebec province, where you had one soldier who was killed after he was run over by a suspected Islamic jihadist. And now you have an apparent soldier who was targeted, according to the witnesses on the ground. They say that they saw a man show up with a rifle and fire 4 shots at this Canadian soldier. Peter Brooks, appreciate your insight. I want to bring in CNN law enforcement analyst Tom Fuentes for more insight on what has been happening here. And what is your take, especially with the security there at the Parliament building, Tom?
Well, I think there's going to be the same issue there as we had here in Washington at the White House with how does somebody get through the front door? And in this case, somebody that's armed with a rifle. I think it's pretty clear from the witnesses that the soldier that was shot was targeted on purpose. But then you have the secondary entry by one or more people into the Parliament building, apparently unopposed at the door, and that's extremely problematic. I think at this point it's too soon to know if it was an attack by more than one person, what the background is of the person. Do we have a deranged shooter? Do we have a jihadist? What that situation is, we'll learn in the next hours and days. But for the moment, it's very problematic, and the fact that it's still an active, ongoing shooting situation is indicative of the lack of security at the front door.
Right, and it's quite frightening as we see these live images there, Tom. Police officers pointing their guns, their rifles, it looks like up to the top of a building there. We were just hearing from Ottawa police earlier that they believed that there was at least one or more shooters on the roof of the building, the Parliament building there. So obviously just dramatic pictures there as we take a look. They're taking cover, they're drawing their weapons, and as we just saw a few moments ago, drawing them, pointing it towards the sky, presumably towards the roof of one of the Parliament buildings there on the Hill. Tom, practically speaking here, because we were just mentioning with Peter Brooks that the terror threat level in Canada was just raised a few days ago after this deadly incident with a suspected Islamic jihadist being involved in all of this. What does it mean, in the U.S., Canada, practically speaking, when you raise a terror threat alert level? What is being done when that happens?
Well, what it's supposed to mean is that, especially at targets that are supposed to be hard in the first place, such as the Parliament building or the White House here in Washington or the U.S. Capitol building, that there should be not only additional security, but a heightened sense of security as to a potential attack. And, so there's going to be a lot of questions in this case of how is it somebody with a rifle gets through the front door unopposed. So that's going to be a critical issue. We're going to have to find out exactly. But at the end of the day, whether the person is just deranged, whether he's a copycat from seeing what happened in Washington, whether he's a jihadist, any of the above motives are not relevant to the point of how do you get through the front door with weaponry. Now, as far as witnesses saying that there's people with guns on the roof or there's other people running around, this makes it very difficult for the police to sort out sightings of law enforcement officers with guns running around or law enforcement on the roof as opposed to other, bad guys. And this is something that always comes up in every type of shooting like this, where additional suspects are identified by witnesses who, at the end of the day, aren't really suspects. They could be law enforcement themselves. They could be plainclothes security officers in the area. In this case, we have the ceremonial soldiers whose guns are probably empty and cannot really help. But at least the law enforcement, uniform and non-uniform, would have to be running, obviously, to the scene and covering all angles of this and can be misidentified by the public.
I would imagine this is quite a challenging time for law enforcement officers as they're not exactly sure how many gunmen they are looking for at this point, but we're seeing these live pictures right now. Looks like people inside one of the Parliament buildings being escorted out right now by police. Quite a frightening situation as police are still looking for at least one or more gunmen who were involved in this shooting earlier in the morning in Ottawa. For those of you who are just joining us, I want to recap what we have been seeing, what we have been hearing. This all happened just before 10 o'clock this morning local time. Witnesses there on the scene say that at least one gunman, but Ottawa police say numerous